On the 10th of August 2026, the largest reservoir in the United States fell to the lowest level it has ever held, 1,040.3 feet. The white band above the water is about 186 feet tall. Las Vegas saw this coming and built a pump that works 20 feet below the point where the dam stops passing water at all. A town came back out of the mud, so did a bomber, so did a man in a barrel, and all of it traces to one afternoon in 1922, when 7 states sat down in Santa Fe and wrote a number on a piece of paper. The river was never that big, time 22. Start with the waterline because everything else in this video hangs off it. Lake Mead's record high was 1,225.44 feet in July of 1983. On the 18th of August 2026, it sat at 1,039.66. That white ring on the rock is not chalk, and it is not limestone. It's calcium carbonate and dissolved salts left behind on whatever rock happened to be there, the way scale builds inside a kettle. Same chemistry. Now the number that actually matters. At elevation 1,035 feet, the older turbines inside Hoover Dam begin to cavitate, and the Bureau of Reclamation says generating capacity falls from 1,302 megawatts to 382. The lake is currently sitting less than 5 feet above that line. 21. Las Vegas takes about 90% of its water out of that reservoir, so Las Vegas did the arithmetic before anyone else did. It bored 3 miles of 20-foot tunnel underneath the lake and finished it in 2015. Then it built a pumping station with 34 submersible pumps that came in at $522 million under budget and switched it on in April of 2022. The old intakes sit at 1,050 feet and 1,000 feet. The new one works down to 875. Hoover Dam stops making power at 950 feet. At 895, it cannot pass water downstream at all. That elevation has a name, Dead Pool. Las Vegas can keep drinking 20 feet below it. 20. There was a town under there, St. Thomas, Nevada, founded in 1865 by Mormon settlers who thought they were in Utah. They weren't. A survey in 1870 put them in Nevada, and Nevada wanted back taxes in gold, so most of them walked away the following year rather than pay. People came back, and then the lake came. The last citizen of St. Thomas was a man named Hugh Lord. On the 11th of June, 1938, he rode away from his own house. The water eventually stood more than 60 feet above the tallest building in town. You can walk to it now. There's an unmaintained Park Service trail about 2.5 miles there and back. Foundations, cisterns, the outlines of rooms sitting in the open desert. 19. On the 21st of July, 1948, a B-29 superfortress came down in the Overton arm of the lake. Everyone got out. It was carrying an instrument called a sun tracker, measuring light intensity at altitude. A private dive team found the wreck in 2001 in about 280 feet of water. It's now in roughly 100 feet. The aircraft has risen 180 feet without moving an inch. 18. 200 miles downstream, there's a dam you have almost certainly never heard of, and it is the reason Los Angeles and Phoenix both have water. Parker Dam is 320 feet tall. 235 of those feet are below the original riverbed. Below the riverbed, 73% of it is underground. Reclamation calls it the deepest dam in the world, and from the road you're looking at, about 85 feet of it. Both of the great aqueducts start there. 17. On the 1st of May 2022, 2 brothers out on a boat found a metal barrel sitting on newly exposed lake bed near Hemingway Harbour. There was a man inside it. Metro established the cause of death as a gunshot wound and ruled it a homicide. They dated the killing to somewhere between the mid-70s and the early 80s, using his clothes and his shoes, which had been sold at Kmart. The FBI lab built a composite of his face. He has never been identified. Now, here is the part that got lost, and it matters. The police never said this was organised crime. Lieutenant Jason Johansson said the opposite, on the record. The minute you hear body in the barrel, he said, your mind goes straight to the mob. And the fact is, we're not going to know until we know who he is. He also pointed out that the weapon was not a .22, which is the detail everyone assumes. The mob story came from a museum spokesman, not from the detectives, and the other remains that came out of that shoreline were not murders. A man who drowned in 2002, a man who drowned in 1974, a man missing since 1998. That's a lake with 90 years of boats on it giving back the people it took. 16. Concrete went into Hoover Dam between June 1933, and May 1935. 3.25 million cubic yards of it in the dam alone, poured in 5-foot lifts, cooled by 582 miles of 1-inch steel pipe fed from a refrigeration plant that could make 1,000 tons of ice a day. 96 men died building it, not 112. That higher figure counts deaths from 1922, 6 years before the project was even authorized, and nobody is buried in the concrete. Reclamation states it flatly. The pores were 5 feet deep and watched constantly. The claim that the concrete is still curing today is a garbled version of something real. Engineers calculated that a single monolithic pore would have taken 125 years to cool. That's precisely why they didn't do it that way. Cooling finished in March of 1935. One more thing about this dam, and hold on to it. The man it's named after chaired the meeting that decided how much water it would ever have to hold. That comes back at number 1. 15. Upstream, the river runs through a hole in the ground that geologists are still arguing about. The rocks at the bottom of the Grand Canyon are 1,840,000,000 years old. The rim is 270 million, 277 river miles of it. The canyon is young, but how young is a live fight in the literature? One camp used helium, dating to argue there was a canyon nearly this deep 70 million years ago. Another camp measured it segment by segment and found some stretches old and others only 5 or 6 million years. Both sides agree on one thing. The Colorado, as a single river running the whole way through, is about 5 or 6 million years old. The argument is whether it dug this itself or inherited somebody else's holes. 14. When Glen Canyon Dam closed in 1963, archaeologists had already documented about 2,000 sites in the canyon. It was about to drown. Everyone assumed they were gone. As the reservoir dropped, at least a quarter of them came back out. The heavy stone structures had survived the water almost intact. And then people found them. Amy Schott, the lead archaeologist for Glen Canyon, put it plainly. The direct impacts, she said, are often not from submersion. They're from visitors, fresh graffiti over petroglyphs, fire rings, litter. 60 years underwater preserved these places. 6 years of daylight is wrecking them. 13. The dam holds back more than water. Glen Canyon has cut the sand, reaching the Grand Canyon by more than 90%. The beaches down there are made of sediment the river no longer delivers, and every flood season takes a little more of it away. It doesn't come back. The single most important sand supplier inside the park now is the Paria, a river most people have never heard of, joining the Colorado just below the dam. 12. It changed the temperature. Before the dam, this river ran at freezing in winter and above 86 degrees in summer. Afterwards it came out of the bottom of Lake Powell at a flat 46, all year, every year. The humpback chub needs 61 degrees to spawn, so it stopped spawning in most of the river. Then in 2021 and 22, the reservoir dropped so far that the intakes started pulling from nearer the warm surface, and the releases came out at 59. Smallmouth bass appeared below the dam, warm water predators, in a stretch of river that had been too cold for them since 1963. The dam's effect on this river is not fixed. It changes as the water falls. 11. Now go back and look at the paperwork. Everything from here is about who owns this water on paper and what the paper is worth. 30 tribal nations hold rights in this basin. 22 of them are quantified at roughly 3,200,000 acre-feet a year, somewhere between 22 and 26% of the river. The doctrine comes from a case called Winters, decided on the 6th of January, 1908. It held that creating a reservation implicitly reserves the water needed to make that reservation work, with priority dating from the day the reservation was created, which was early. For most of these reservations, that date is decades before 1922, which means the oldest claims on this river sit above the agreement that divided it, not inside it. Tell me in the comments whether you knew that one, because almost nobody does. 10. The 1944 treaty with Mexico guarantees 1.5 million acre-feet a year. For 2026, the allocation was announced at 1,352,595 because Lake Mead was projected to sit too low on the 1st of January. For most of the past 60 years, the river has been entirely consumed before it reaches its own delta. In 2014, they tried something. 105,392 acre-feet released from Morelos Dam over 8 weeks in spring. About 1,300 acre-feet reached the estuary, 1%. Greenness along the corridor rose 17% that year, bird numbers rose 20%, and the water table came up as much as 9 meters in places. Within 6 months, the groundwater was back where it started, and by 2016, the vegetation was below where it had been before the release. The Geological Survey measured the pulse at about 5% of the size of a natural spring flood, and it moved almost no sediment at all. 9. The river has done this before, and the last time it went where it wanted, it stayed for 16 months. In 1904, the California Development Company cut a new intake into the West Bank to get around silt choking its canal. In 1905, floodwater tore the temporary works open. The entire Colorado River turned left into the Salton Sink. It ran there until February of 1907. What finally stopped it was the Southern Pacific Railroad dumping rock from its own trains because the water was coming up over its tracks. That accident is the Salton Sea. It is the largest lake in California, and nobody meant to make it. 8. It is dying now, and it is taking the air with it. In 1974, the salinity was 35 grams per litre. Sampling in November of 2024 found between 68 and 86,000 milligrams per litre across 4 stations. The Pacific Ocean runs between 32 and 37, twice the ocean. Since 2002, 37,804 acres of lakebed have come out of the water, 4,493 of those in 2024 alone, almost double the recent yearly average. Researchers tracked about 500 children around age 10 from 2019 to 2022, running nearly 1,300 lung function tests and matching each one against that child's dust exposure in the preceding 3 months. The children with more exposure had worse lungs. 7. Meanwhile, Arizona built a machine to carry the river uphill. The Central Arizona Project runs 336 miles from Lake Havasu to south of Tucson, 14 pumping plants, 3 tunnels, 10 siphons. It lifts water nearly 3,000 vertical feet. One plant alone, the Mark Wilmer, uses 6 pumps of 66,000 horsepower each to raise water more than 800 feet in a single step. The Central Arizona Project is the single largest consumer of electricity in the state of Arizona. Its entire purpose is to move water to a place the water does not want to go. 6. And it was built with a knife already in it. To get California to support the bill in 1968, Arizona had to accept that California's 4.4 million acre-feet would come first in any shortage. The Congressional Research Service states it plainly. As a condition of California's support, Arizona agreed that California has priority over Central Arizona Project supplies. Under the current shortage tier, Arizona is absorbing a cut of 512,000 acre-feet. That's around 30% of what the project normally carries. 30% gone. Arizona spent $4 billion on a canal and signed away its place in the queue to get it. 5. Denver is on the wrong side of the continental divide. Every drop of rain that falls on Denver runs east. Denver drinks west. Denver water takes about half of its drinking water from Colorado River tributaries on the western slope and moves it through the mountain. The Moffett Water Tunnel runs 6.2 miles and carries up to 100,000 acre-feet a year. The Roberts Tunnel runs 23 miles underneath the Continental Divide. A city that sits in the Mississippi's watershed drinks from the Pacific side through a hole bored under the Rockies. 4. None of this is new, it's just bigger. More than 500 miles of canals have been mapped in the Phoenix Basin, dug by the Hohokam, some of them over 20 miles long. The largest was 75 feet across at the top and 6 feet deep, built between 1100 and 1300. The National Park Service calls it the largest and most complex irrigation system of any culture in the New World north of Peru. The first canals white settlers used in the Salt River Valley were not new canals. They cleaned out Hohokam ditches and ran water down them. A large stretch of the Grand Canal, flowing through central Phoenix today, sits directly on top of a Hohokam main line. Why the system ended is genuinely unresolved. The salinization story you have probably heard is contradicted by the archaeologists working on it, who say the evidence for ancient salt buildup is lacking. What they describe instead is slower and more familiar: a century of intensive use degrading the land near the intakes, people drifting away, and the cooperative labour that a big canal requires simply falling apart. 3. Here is where the water actually goes. Across the whole basin, irrigation accounts for 74% of everything humans directly take out of this river, and cattle feed, meaning alfalfa and grass hay, is 46% of all direct human water use in the Colorado River Basin. 62% of the agricultural share, not cities, not lawns, not swimming pools in Phoenix. Hay. 2. Which brings us to the land the whole thing was built for. The Imperial Valley gets a little over 3 inches of rain a year. That's it. It has 454,206 farmable acres, and in 2023 it harvested 578,659 because the land is worked 2 and 3 times over. Gross value $2.69 billion. The Imperial Irrigation District holds a court-decreed right to 2.6 million acre-feet with a priority date of 1901. In 2024, it took 2,290,264. The entire state of Arizona took 1,934,518. One irrigation district in the California desert consumes more Colorado River water than Arizona does. And under the agreement California signed in 1931, the farm priorities come first. Metropolitan Water District, which is Los Angeles, San Diego, and the whole coastal plain, is fourth in line at 550,000 acre-feet. In a deep shortage, the cities go to zero before the alfalfa loses a drop. 1. On the 24th of November 1922, 7 state commissioners met in Santa Fe. The chairman was Herbert Hoover, then Secretary of Commerce, and yes, the same Hoover. They gave 7.5 million acre-feet to the upper basin and 7.5 million to the lower. Then they added another million for the lower basin further down the page. 16 million, before Mexico was even in the room. The figure they worked from was an assumed flow of 16.4 million acre-feet a year, taken from about 20 years of gauge readings. Here is the part that isn't taught. A reclamation engineer named E.C. LaRue had already published a lower number, 15 million for 1895 to 1920, published before they signed. The negotiators knew the figures were in dispute. They used the bigger one, and those 20 years of readings turned out to be one of the wettest stretches in 4.5 centuries. From 1906 to 1930, the river averaged about 17 million. The real long-term average at Lee's Ferry is 14.6 million. Since the year 2000, it has been 12.3. So follow it forward. The number goes on the paper. Hoover Dam is built to that number, and Hugh Lord rows away from his house. Glen Canyon is built to it, and 2,000 archaeological sites go under. Parker Dam and 2 aqueducts are built to it, and Los Angeles becomes possible. Arizona signs away its priority to get a canal built to it. 500,000 acres of desert in the Imperial Valley become worth $2.5 billion a year because of it. 40 million people, 7 states, 2 countries, and 5.5 million acres of farmland, all arranged around a figure that was too high when it was written. I want to be precise about this because it gets exaggerated. The states are not physically drawing 16 million acre-feet. The upper basin has never come close to using its share. It took 4.5 million in 2024. Total consumption across the basin runs about 13.1 million against a flow of 12.3. The overdraft is real, but it is closer to 800,000 acre-feet a year than to 4 million. They did not use more water than the river has. They promised more water than the river has, and then they built a civilization on the promise. The white ring on the rock at Lake Mead is what the difference looks like. The river was never that big. So tell me, which of these 22 changes how you'll look at that waterline? Subscribe, and I'll keep going underneath America. This has been States Explained. Thanks for watching, and remember, the map only ever shows you the top.